Hello and welcome to Maths with Mr Amison. In this video we're going to practice how to estimate the mean from grouped frequency tables. If you need to recap this topic then please watch Mr Chowdhury's video. I'm going to start by showing you an example, talking through it, and then letting you copy it down and have a go at one yourself. Feel free to pause at any time. So in this example, to estimate the mean length, so the data is the length, and the key word here is estimate. A lot of you, when you think of estimating, you automatically think of rounding to the nearest whole number or one significant figure, things like that. But when it comes to group frequency tables, estimate means something different. Because in a group frequency table, we don't know any exact values. For example, in this first group, if our length is between 0 and 4, I've not included units here because it doesn't really matter in this case, but if we have two objects with a length between 0 and 4, we don't know the exact length of either of those objects, so we have to estimate what that length of each object would be. And the best way to estimate that length is to find the middle of the group. So here, the class interval is between 0 and 4, where 0 is in the group because it's less than or equal to our length and 4 is not in the group. To estimate the length of each object, it would be the midpoint of the end values. So the midpoint of 0 and 4, which is 2. Sometimes finding the midpoint can be a bit complicated, but really it's just the mean of the first and last number in the group. So the mean of 0 and 4, 0 plus 4 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. 4 plus 8 is 12, 12 divided by 2 is 6. And that gives us the midpoint. So that midpoint is an estimation of the length of each of these objects. So if we have two objects with an average length of 2, that means the total length of those two objects is estimated to be 4. 2 times 2, which is 4. If we have three objects in this group and the average length of each object is 6, 6 times 3 will give us the total estimated length of the objects in that group. And that continues. So we now have the estimated total length of the objects in each group, and if we add those up it gives us an estimation of the total length of all of the objects altogether, or in other words, the total of the data. And we know from finding means that we have to find the total of the data and divide by how many points of data there are, or in other words, the sum of the frequencies. So if we do our 74 divided by our 9, that is the sum of our frequency times our midpoint divided by the sum of our frequency. Noting the notation here, this symbol here means sum of. F is frequency, M is midpoint. So the sum of the frequency times the midpoint divided by the sum of the frequency. So 74 divided by 9, which gives us 8.22 to 3 significant figures. Make sure you take time to write that down. Try and write things down in the format and the layout that I've got here. And then have a go yourself at estimating the mean weight on the right. Now you've had a chance to have a go at that. The mean in this case is at the sum of our frequencies times our midpoints divided by the sum of our frequencies. Now the way to know that we use this method is first to recognize we have groups, and second to recognize that it says estimate the mean weight. So we have an estimate and we have groups, so we're going to have to use this to find the mean. So if we want the midpoints, we can write the midpoints on the left hand side, the midpoints being the same as the first example. The frequency times the midpoint we can write over here. 2 times 4 is 8, 6 times 6 is 36, etc. If we then add up those, we get a total of the frequency times midpoints, the sum of the frequency times midpoints of 148, and the total of the frequencies, the sum of the frequencies, as 18. So we get 148 divided by 18, which gives us 8.22 again. Notice that in order to go from the first table to this table, all I did is multiply each of the frequencies by 2. So the spread of those frequencies is exactly the same, so the mean shouldn't change, and it doesn't. Alright, have a go at these 6 questions. The first 4 are simpler. Question 5 is a little bit trickier. Question 6 uses algebra in a difficult way. See if you can have a go at those. So in this case we have estimating the mean length for the first question. The sum of the frequency times the midpoints would be 20. And in this case the only midpoint that we're really interested in is the midpoint of the 0 and the 4, the 2, because it's 2 times 10 gives us 20 here, and the midpoints multiplied by the zeros here will give us 0 all the way down. So we'll have a total here of 20 divided by a total here of 10, which gives us a mean of 2. Which makes a lot of sense because all of them are in this first group, and we said that the average length would be approximately 2. For this question here, we're split between these two groups, split evenly between the two groups, so I would expect the mean to be 4, and in fact it does end up being 4. 2 times 5 is 10, 6 times 5 is 30, 10 plus 30 is 40, divided by the 10 frequency gives us 4. Question 3, we have these here. This time it's split between these two groups, but notice that the width of this group being 4, but this width of this group being 2 is different. So the average wouldn't be 12 this time because 12 is not the middle of the two groups. We have a midpoint here of 10. 10 times 5 is 50, and we have a midpoint here of 13, and 13 times 5 is 65. So 50 add 65 is 115, divided by the total frequency of 5 plus 5 is 10, so we get 11.5. This question is exactly the same as this one, except I've just doubled the frequencies, so your frequency times midpoints doubles, so this becomes 230 instead of 115, and the frequency becomes 20 instead of 10, so we get 11.5 again. This one's a bit trickier. This one says estimate the mean amount of time in seconds, so we're given an amount of time in minutes. Alright, so here we have 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 5 is 15, 7 times 9 is 63, 8 times 13 over here, and then if we add those up, then we get 186. If we divide that by the total of the frequencies, well, the total of the frequencies is 20, so we divide that by 20, we get 9.3, but that's in minutes. If we want to convert that to seconds, we then have to multiply that answer by 60 to get us 558. Question 6, the midpoint of this group is easy enough, but the midpoint of these two groups is fairly difficult. This one the midpoint is 2, this one the midpoint is half of 4 plus n. 4 plus n divided by 2, which is 2 plus a half of n. In other words, you can half this and add them together. We can do the same for this, half of this plus half of this, half n plus 6. So here we have 2 plus half n, so we'd have 2 plus half n here because the frequency is 1, and here we have half n plus 6, so we'd have half n plus 6 over here as well. So when we add them all up, we'd have 2 2's is 4, plus another 2 plus half n, so it's plus n altogether, plus 6, plus 13, which should get us 25 plus n. The total of the frequencies is 5, so we end up with this equation, 25 plus n over 5 is 7. We can multiply both sides of our equation by 5 to get 25 plus n equals 35. Take 25 away from both sides, and we get that n has to equal 10. Alright, I know that one was quite tricky, but I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching, and speak to you soon.